And it has to do with the next questions. Oops, I did two, I'm so sorry. Already I messed up. The Emma story is the setting for thinking about renewal in the diocese, because the questions are the same now as it was for them back in the day of Easter. What are we discussing? Will we invite Jesus to stay with us? And are we open to that change of heart that's called for? And so the second slide I went through too quickly. There's a task force in the diocese, and this is what we're sharing with you today. In this task force has been formed almost for a year now under Bishop Scharfenberger's administration, but now confirmed under Bishop Fisher. There's a task force of a variety of people, not just priests, some lay people, some deacons, parishioners, make up this task force. And they were looking into and gaining from different parishes ideas what would be good for the diocese right now. And since Bishop Michael was appointed, he's asked Father Brian Zielinski to be the vicar for Renewal for this effort that the task force is doing. So it's not just Father Brian, but a whole group of people who've been trying to formulate a way forward for our diocese. I was saying to a couple of people before you all got here, the idea that we have a pandemic is above and beyond this stuff. This would be something we'd be talking about whether there was a pandemic or not. There are realities that we have to face in the diocese, and so the pandemic complicates and slows down in some ways what we need to do, because it's our reality as well. But we need to be doing some of this nevertheless. So this Brian Zielinski, he's a young man, young priest. I studied with him actually out at Christ the King. He's affable, he's a very nice guy. And he's a pastor right now at St. Marian's Formville, as well as being this vicar. So a question comes up, and this is what the task force was dealing with, and we are as well. Why renewal now? And it's very clear the present diocesan model is not sustainable. There are realities in our diocese, in addition to the Child Victims Act and the bankruptcy and so many factors, we just can't keep going on as we are. So they know that either you can plan for the changes or changes are going to happen. So that's why this task force is trying to do what they're doing. At any point, if you have any comment or question or thought, or I offer a few factors to consider. There are many more factors to consider, but these are some of the things the task force was talking about. They did their research and planning investigation. Right now, the active priests in our diocese have an average age of 72. The number of people being ordained, as opposed to the number of people retiring and or dying, doesn't equal. There are many more who are not going to be in service any longer than are being ordained to serve. There's a desire to retain the parishes in the diocese. So we want to keep the parishes, but there's 161, as I understand. And we have the aging of and decline in number of practicing parishioners above and beyond the pandemic. Remember, this is just real. Demographics of the area show that. What we just got with the census shows that we have fewer people. Fewer people means no matter what, we're going to have declining numbers. Then there's all the thing of people feeling estranged from the church because of the child's victim problems. And so we have a situation. We have a situation. If you think of other factors and you want to throw them in there, please, anytime. So there's a challenge. The task force is trying to figure out, okay, we want to renew the church, feel reinvigorated in the Diocese of Buffalo. How can we do that while maintaining the parishes we have with fewer priests and parishioners? So they don't, there's a real reaction in my understanding, and Father Jim might corroborate this, The journey in faith and grace brings bad thoughts to people's minds. It was a hard and dreadful situation that the diocese went through when so many schools and parishes were closed so quickly. That was something this effort doesn't want to get near, which is why the idea we're going to try not to close any parishes is the goal. So how can we do this while there are fewer priests and fewer parishioners? So they think and they think and they think and they thought. And so there's a proposed path, and this is the heart of the presentation. And there's lots of questions about it that are unanswered. But other dioceses in the United States and in Canada have tried this model of making families of parishes, so that there would be a grouping of parishes that would be a family. One of the statements in the presentation was there would be not a single standalone parish any longer in the diocese. All parishes would be in families of parishes. And so this idea would be the example up here, and there are other ways to think about it, but maybe 5 parishes would be a family, and 3 priests would serve the sacramental needs of those 5 parishes. That's the proposal, keep all the parishes. Individual parishes are incorporated as their identities. St. George is incorporated. We have our bank accounts and our monies. We would keep our identity, but we might be cousins with, or aunts and uncles with, or however they want to use the family terminology, with other parishes. And so we would be a family of parishes served by a group of priests. So that's the proposal. There's not a lot of flesh on this proposal yet, though. The task force, one of the questions was, who makes the families? And it would be the task force working together in the diocese, putting together the families, which parishes are grouped as a family. And then a priest asked, well, what if we don't like our family? And so there would be, the thinking now is there's a way to request going with another family. And so one of the questions, Frank Lewandowski, who does the Haiti work for us so much here, he asked the question about, well, St. George and Nativity of our Lord in Orchard Park have a very close working relationship to support St. Michael's in Haiti. What if we weren't in the same family? What happens to that relationship? That's just a question. We don't know. Would it need to break? Not necessarily. There's no reason in my mind it would break. But that's the thing. This family of parishes is a concept. And I think one of the reasons Father Jim thought it would be good to share this concept with as many parishioners who could hear it is that it's such a new idea. It's better to maybe let it percolate a little and see what we think about it, because if you just read about it one day that you are now in the family of these 5 parishes, where did that come from? So it's being thought about, being chewed over, trying to work out the details. But few details are done yet. It's an idea. That's what they're working on. Thoughts, comments? I wrote down some of the implications. So go ahead, Ann.
Well, I have just a comment on that. It's like, I think it's an advantage for all the parishioners. I worry about the priests. It's only 3 priests for 5 parishes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of needs.
Right, exactly.
So I don't know how that would play out. Is there going to be less masses? Is what I'm wondering.
That's the next thing with the implications. But sure, thinking of it, and if the active priest median age is 72.
Right.
So 3 gentlemen are serving the needs of 5 parishes, and they are not spring chickens either. And so, that's the thing. It's tough. Frank?
Well, I know you want to make big changes and everything, but one of the most glaring things in making changes is, I think you're leaving out the heart. And by heart, I mean, how about the concept of women becoming priests and lay people, married people, whatever, also becoming priests? Put priests in quotes, okay? Because your main people that are going to be running the show are diminishing. So what difference does it make if you have the biggest plan, you know, that this group here and we're all get together, but there's no general to run the operation? So I'm saying, and I know it's not local, but it would be, but I suggest that the local people send it on over to Italy, wherever the big boss is, and say, look at, what is the problem with having women assigned priest duties? What is wrong? What is immoral about that? What is immoral about having a married man and woman also act in tandem to running particular places? Other religions do that and they seem to prosper. Why we're gonna hit ourselves on the head to do this gigantic, beautiful plan, and we go to say, who do we call when the lights are out? Well, there's nobody to call because they're all retired or whatever. So
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out
Right.
as part of your discussion, at least, when you get together with all the people who
Well,
know all of it.
I put this back on you as well, and before long I give you a place where you can send your commentary if you'd like. So don't worry.
Nobody will pay attention to me, believe
Just
me.
so-
You
just
gotta
so-
get somebody with some authority who says,
Yeah.
you know.
Just so you know, one of my ways of looking at this, thank heavens, because of my congregation being international. So we have sisters like in Brazil, and when we get together, we talk about how the church works in different places in the world. Father Jim's been in Central America frequently. The church, we have a United States maybe myopia where we think we're the mover and shaker of the church, and actually we're not. And so the idea is the church is universal, and these are not new questions globally. These are situations and difficulties that have been met head on through other countries and dioceses around the world, where there are fewer priests and many people and many needs, and how to reorganize so that other people are empowered to share God's message. That's part of the whole thing. Some of it is that we're in the U.S. kind of narrow visioned about that. We might be able to learn from some of the other cultures that have already addressed this. So that's part of that. And I think that's where the Pope's vision also, having been Argentine, he has a sense of how the church can work other than some of the northern hemisphere countries have been kind of locked into. But it's a slow thing. We're the Titanic. We don't turn on a dime. We're a big institution. And so that's why changes go slowly. So that's part of it. Yeah, go ahead, Father.
Well, I would just like to say that we have a perfect model here of how things can work between Sister and myself. I mean, I'm the sacramental minister, but I don't have to do any of the administration. All of that is taken care of by the people in the parish, along with Sisters with her direction. I take care of the things that a priest is called to take care of, saying of the Mass, hearing confessions, and so forth and so on. And so it's working out well, and we have two other parishes where they're doing the same thing, where the priest is not the pastor in the old sense of the word, but he's doing the pastoral duties that are required of a priest, and is relinquishing the power, the administration of the parish itself, which, if you're talking about priests who are 72 and above, that's one of the things that's going to help us quite a bit. Now, the other thing is, I served in Bolivia many years ago, and I've told this to some people already. When I was first ordained, I was in Puerto Rico for a year, and then I went off to Bolivia in Central America, South America, and I was given 23 villages to take care of, because there were so few priests. So what do? Well, what we did was we would name catechists in those 23 villages, where they all had churches, at a time when, after the Spanish conquistadors went into South America, they established churches all in these villages, and then they were called back to Spain. And so the parishes were left without anybody to take care of them, except lay people, men and women, who did catechetical work. And what they would do is they would teach the catechism to the children and to the adults. So they had classes, and they learned what they had to teach by coming miles on the back of trucks to our center house in the Altiplano of Bolivia, and we would teach them and then send the catechists back to train their people on different things. And they would have services on Sunday which didn't include Mass. They would have a scripture service every Sunday. They'd read the Bible, and then they learn whatever they learned in their catechism class. They would teach it to the people. And about the only time we got around was once or twice a year, because the villages were so far apart. And of course, you had to be back at the center house training all these people. So you had that going on. And so I would get out maybe once or twice to a village to say Mass. And you say, well, what kind of a church is that if you only have Mass once or twice a year? And I say, well, that's the church that I was familiar with in Bolivia. And the reason was because they didn't have enough priests. So, and we're coming now where, because of the reduction in the number of priests, we're not getting as many priests into the priesthood, because many of the young people today have become secularized by the society in which we live. And they don't see church as important at all. They're what they call the nuns, not to offend sister.
N-O-N.
N-O-N-E-S, which means they have no affiliation to anything. All they're saying is, I'll do what I want, the way I want to do it, and I don't care. I'm not going to have any church tell me what to do. Now that's one of the problems we're dealing with the young people. So they don't want to become priests. And it would be nice if they did, but they're not interested. And so we've lost them. Now, then the question comes down is, well, what do we do with what we've got here? Well, it seems to me that we've got to start thinking in terms of using as many lay people in those kinds of roles as we can, and that's what the family decides. So if you have 5 parishes working together, you've got the people in all these parishes saying, well, what can we do to make sure that what's happening in the church today doesn't happen to our children too? We want our children to be raised in the faith, so therefore, as a family, we all talk together and we decide, okay, well, if we're going to do that, then we've got to have teachers to teach these children about the faith. And of course, you're always going to need the backing of your families at home. One of the problems, of course, today is some of our adults are not concerned about the religious welfare of their children. They want them to be scientists and lawyers and doctors and all that kind of stuff, but they don't want to teach them the fundamental moral issues that confront us day after day. So that's the kind of situation that we're in. And it's a risky thing, there's no doubt about it, it's a risk, but we got through the journey in faith and grace. We didn't think we would. But we've come out stronger, I think, as a result of it. We've brought 3 parishes together, which we formed in St. George's. What was it?
St. Catherine.
St. Catherine of Siena and St.
Our Lady of the
Sacred Heart in Colvin. And we've made it work. And so there's no reason to think that we can't join other parishes and make it work as well. I'm talking too much.
No, that's fine. Well, that's like the first one of this. These are just some of the implications that I thought of a model of a family of parishes. Ministries can be shared. And so if somebody has a really nice setup with RCIA process, people well trained, well, why wouldn't maybe everyone of the family parishes have their people trained at the same place in terms of getting ready for an Easter Vigil, where people are welcomed into the church? We already do this sort of thing with Elaine. I always say her last name incorrectly. Alice. Elaine Alice. Elaine is a youth minister, but she's a youth minister for us and 2 other parishes at the same time. And so she's already bringing together young people from 3 parishes locally. The idea that we could have a teacher situation, like if we have so few young people here that it's been a little challenge in these last 3 years to have classes for faith formation and religious ed. But if there was a family of parishes, there would probably be a better number of first and second graders, third and fourth graders, the way we kind of bring the kids together. But we really use the best catechists. We could use space. We have great space here at St. George. Other parishes don't have anything but a city block. And so, you know, you never know who you're going to be family with. But the idea is we have some wonderful benefits here, and at the same time, other people would have things that we don't have, and we could mix and match like that. That would be a part of the implication. We know that the identity of the parishes is important, and so that would be a plus in a family of parishes, that we keep the identity of the parish. And like I say, the incorporated structure, funding. One of the clear questions from a young priest to Father Brian was, what about the money? Does it all get pooled together? And it does not. The parish money is the parish money. And so the ongoing question to that, though, is, yes, but in a family, of course, what if somebody has a situation and they're down on their luck and they need help from their family? Yes, that could happen. Nobody's saying that couldn't happen, that parish families might have to help one another out.
And that would come up like in parish council or something.
Right, it wouldn't just be mandated from on high, it would be part of the discussion, right? Yeah, for sure, 3 priests, 5 parishes, for sure, something as simple as mass schedules would have to change, because there's no way to bilocate yet. And so there's no way that we could have 2 10 a.m. masses or 3 10 a.m. masses going on at the same time, you know, with a number of priests covering. So there might have to be some changes. Again, this kind of plan, Father Brian seemed to be thinking, maybe we'd even hear this summer the family groupings, and other priests raised their hand and said, that's way too fast. Yeah, people's head and hearts can't get that together that quickly to think by September you'd be in a family of parishes. So there's no certainty on the timeline. It's in flux right now and how they might do this. But Father Brian, I think, feels the push of his mandate to get things happening, that he'd like to meet with all the vicariates, get as much information as he can from all the places he talks. He spoke with our Eastern Erie Vicariate first, and that was about 2 weeks ago now. And so he's been going to other places, sharing the same information. And it's this information that I'm sharing with you. The meat of it, like I say, isn't all hammered down. There are not firm decisions on how to make this work, but the idea is there. And that bottom one about building we want to promote and share our faith. We want to be people of God. We want to praise God and share the joy that God has blessed us with. And so if we have more people to do that with, I think that's a good thing, if we're put together with others.
And of course, the idea that masses, of course, would be reduced somewhat too, and the possibility would be that maybe there wouldn't be a mass on a particular Sunday, say in St. George's Parish, but they'd say, well, because Father is sick or something like that, that you would have to go over to, say, Nativity or something like that, or maybe to Immaculate Conception in East Aurora. I mean, those are the things that could happen. But if they're part of the family, then we're going to try to see that fairness is shown to all the parishes. So if we have to go over to Nativity 1 week, then the next week they come over to St. George's, you know, that kind of thing. So we would be thinking in terms of sharing with one another. But it's all way in the future. We're not anywhere near that at this particular point. But we want to talk about these things, as Sister mentioned very clearly, is that we don't want it just to be thrown on us at the last moment, and I didn't hear anything about it, what's going on, so that's why we wanted to have this meeting. That's why we're streaming it too, so that other people in the parish can learn what we're talking about, and perhaps talk to you and to talk to one another about what's happening. Do you have any other questions, Bobby?
No, I was just going to add on to we tend to look at us not having a mass here as a bad thing and having to go somewhere else. or for the other people from Nativity or St. Bernadette's to have to come here because they don't have a Sunday Mass. But that's what you ask us to do every week, is to join with others in the spirit of Christ. And that's really, I think, what will determine whether the Catholic faith persists, is if we open our arms and we also open ourselves to worshiping elsewhere, because God is everywhere. You tell us that every week, every day, pretty much. And it's time for us to wrap our heads and our arms around it and around each other, especially after this time we've had, I think.
A major concern right now after the COVID is are people going to come back to church? They've become so familiar with the online streaming, and some of them are saying, well, why should I go to church? I get what I want here. But what they're missing, of course, is the Eucharist itself. And so that tells us we've sort of lost something when people don't even understand that they're receiving the very body and blood of Christ, and that's what they're missing out at when they have a streamed Mass as opposed to coming to a church and participating in the Eucharist.
Just before everything locked down last year, a number of parishioners had gotten together to try to figure out a series on focusing on the Eucharist, just to help us all have a new love and understanding of the Eucharist. And of course that got squashed when everything got shut down. But we were right on the cusp of, we had the video ready, we had groupings ready. It just didn't happen because COVID became wailing in on us. So, but yeah, focus on Eucharist would make such a difference. And why we do what we do at Mass, those sort of things we do. The COVID lockdown is implicated here in a lot of ways. It's hard to figure out what is going to happen. Some of the priests were very adamant at our meeting that we should not have the streaming, because it does this kind of softens people's need to come to Mass because I can watch it on TV. And so they were saying, stop that streaming. Of course, it's a courtesy to help those folks who were sick or are unable to get here or were extra cautious, or during the time when we were locked down, it was the only way we could share. So, Anne, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
Oh, yeah, just going back to what you were saying, the focus on the Eucharist. Were there videos made? Because, you know, I'm thinking like Corpus Christi's coming up, like wouldn't that be
Right,
time to kind of push?
I'd have to ask, it was Anna Kalinsky who was really trying to get a Eucharist study going, and I think she ended up with a CD set or a DVD set, I don't know.
Yeah, it was Father Barron.
Father
Bishop
Barron.
Oh, yeah, she had started.
Yeah.
She had started it, yeah, and then we just couldn't keep going.
Okay, yeah, when you said, I thought people were making videos, because I was
No,
saying, like,
no.
couldn't we just send it out? Like we do the links to Mass.
Yeah. Father Brian left us all with a challenge. Now, this is the kind of challenge I couldn't do it on the spot at all. It's kind of like what Frank was saying earlier about you gotta think about an hour and a half after you hear something, the idea comes closer in your mind. But this is real. If you have ideas and want to send any of them to that Renewal, you can send an email there to renewal@buffalodiocese.org for Father Brian. And this is what he was asking the people in the vicariates to try and set goals for now and 3 years, and then 3 to 5 and 5 to 10. To me, that's like, I can't begin to imagine how it's going to be. I could maybe try to grab the first one in a year, what I hope is happening. But if you're the kind of thinker that can do this sort of thing, you're welcome to send things. You're welcome to brainstorm, talk about it with family and friends. If you've come up with ideas, well, I think they really should do this, boom, send it to him. He'll read it. How it gets incorporated into the task force and into our plans, I don't know. But he is very sincere in wanting to hear from people the ideas that we have. So that's why I wanted to be sure I put that there, and I'll leave it here on the end so that you have it if you wanted to write it down. Father, anything else you wanted to add, or other comments or thoughts? That's mostly what we understood from the meetings.
Well, just the other thing is that we're in, as Sister was mentioning about the reduction in number of priests, well, we've got 100 and how many parishes?
161 parishes.
161 parishes, and they're anticipating you'll have 100 priests for 161 parishes.
By 2030, so in 8 years or so.
The next 8 to 10 years. So, and we're not expecting, because we don't have the numbers coming into the priesthood to raise the ante. That's the problem. There are more priests who are going into retirement than there are coming into the priesthood. And so that's one of our difficulties that we have to face. But it isn't insurmountable. It isn't impossible, but it's just we got to be aware of the facts and try to do all we can to preserve what we've got. And of course, it does mean in many cases that we're going to be importing immigrant priests too. And that has its blessing, but it also has another difficulty, and that is that sometimes their English language is not as sharp as it could be. And that's where I think in a family of parishes, where if you had somebody who was really good at languages, could train these priests when they come from Africa, from the Philippines, and from all over, I mean, South America. And believe it or not, there are priests to send out from other areas where they're not having the limited shortage of priests that we're having in the United States. So if we can bring those priests in and then train them, that's where I think the laity can really do a fantastic job in sitting down with these priests and helping them with their language. It makes a big difference, a very big difference.
Sure, and some of that, if we have, again, there are many more vocations in the Southern Hemisphere, and that's the culture of the church is different in the Southern Hemisphere. And so it's true, we could have more foreign priests. It's also then a challenge because the picture of the church is different as well. Their lived experience of church is a little different than ours as well. And so it would be a yin and a yang, a yang and whatever. It would be a give and take with the cultural challenges that we would face. Because we're used to much more, everybody has a voice and everybody can say things and be attended to. In some other places, a priest would still have the final word on all things. And one of the challenges Father Jim was able to offer the priests at our meeting was we might need to, like in our model of parish administration, yield some of the administrative duties to others. And some priests aren't happy with that idea. They would rather be in charge of all aspects of the parish so that they know what's happening. And that's a mindset, and that mindset is hard to break. And so if that's the mindset, then this would be very difficult. And if we had 3 priests who each had a very strong mindset that he's the boss, that could be a really hard family situation where we have 3 kings of the castle. That would be difficult, and so there would have to be even this newer kind of collaboration between the 3 priests that they're not used to, and that's something we have to understand. We're asking our priests to open their minds to a different way of doing priesthood, and that's hard. That's not an easy buy-in for everyone. Father Jim's been just wonderful. Anybody asks him about something for the parish, he says, talk to sister. And that's made it work out really easily. We don't have to fight over things.
It's been very peaceful.
But we're very clear that we're working as a team for the sake of the people of the parish, and so we do the best we can, and we negotiate on several things, but otherwise we're just working as well as we can together for the parish. That's what we offered at the meeting as an example anyhow, that this one works pretty well here.
Do you know if any more pastoral administrators are being trained, or did they stop?
The way I understand pastoral ministers, like for my kind of job, I had to go through training and certification. There's still people who are doing that up until the time the seminary was closed, but I don't know if that's still a training option that we have right now. So there are people who have been trained for pastoral administration. It's the situation of enough sacramental ministers, actually. The priests willing to take on the role of a sacramental minister are few. And so that's a challenge in itself. Some are not able because they retired because of being less than able to, perform the duties that they needed to do. And so it's a challenge. That's a little bit of a challenge.
Just a thought, though, I mentioned risk a couple of times, and the reason I'm doing it is because I just love this phrase, this thing on risks. To laugh is to risk appearing a fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out to another is to risk involvement. To explore feelings is the risk of exposing our true self. To place your ideas, your dreams before the crowd is to risk loss. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To live is to risk dying. To hope is to risk despair. To try at all is to risk failure. But to risk we must, because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The man, the woman who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, is nothing. And so, yes, it's a risk. All that we're talking about, we're risking, what we have here, and it's going to change. But, if we're not willing to take a risk and say, then it's all doomed to failure. We've got to begin to realize that we've got some things that need our attention, and if we don't pay attention to them, if we don't act on them, yes, they may fail, but we've got it, and that's why we have the goals for the next 1 to 3 years. We'll find out what works and what doesn't work, and then in the next goal for from 3 to 5 years is going to be, it didn't work. The goals we set for the first 3 years, we have to adjust a little bit more. But these adjustments are taking place all the time in parishes throughout the country and throughout the world all the time. So it's not totally impossible, so to speak. But it is different. And nobody likes difference, Nobody likes difference. You want things always to be the same, and yet, if you look at your own lives, your lives are never the same. We're always changing.
We have to get used to different.
Right, we have to get used to change. As difficult as it is, but I wouldn't want to be still driving a Model T, would you? Well, just for fun.
Any other commentary or thought, question? We don't have lots of answers, but we know they're trying, and they're asked us to help give feedback. Yeah, Marianne.
The families say that there's 5 of them, they've been working together. Like one church that would have thousands of people would not be the leader because we're small, right? They would all work together and it would be democracy.
That's what I think. I think that would be a model.
There'd be no leader in the.
No, not the head of the household. I don't
Right.
think so. I think it's a family of equals. Yeah. And again, whether they have a lot of people or not, that would be one criteria you could think is important, but another criteria is maybe the vitality of the rosary altar, do everything, or we have space here, and maybe we have the blessing of space. So I think the different gifts would happen.
Just one parish would not just lay down the laws for the other 4.
No, I think the parishes, the way I see it happening the most is parishes are hardly affected. We would kind of keep on keeping on the way we are. We do collaborating in some ministerial areas. The thing for me, and the way I see this playing out, that changes the most is the priests and their role. And so we as a parish probably would feel like St. George and act like St. George and have our regular things and our chicken barbecue, and nobody would be telling us we had to do something differently, just like we wouldn't try to tell if it's Immaculate Conception what they should do with their school or what they should be, we wouldn't interfere with each other, but we would collaborate. If their school could be a perfect place for our faith formation classes, where this is a little awkward and has been. So why wouldn't we use the school we have with the classroom space? And so yeah, a collaboration, but not a domination. I would see that, yeah. Frank?
Well, another idea was spinning around in my head. We talk about it in a lot of different things in our own politics, and that's voting. I was just wondering, because there's going to be this group, let's just say priests, I'm not negating anybody, or maybe the nuns, or maybe even some of the, in quotes, bigwigs within the parish decide that we're going to do A, B, and C. And then they come before their congregation and say, guess what, folks, we're doing A, B, and C. Well, I'm being one of the D people and says, well, maybe I should have had a vote. In other words, what I'm getting at, before you pronounce all these rules to your parishes and assume they're going to accept it because you say so, what's wrong with the concept of presenting all these different things to a parish or parishes and saying, vote on it? There might even be one or two parishioners who say, well, we can vote on this, but maybe before we vote, we should consider A, B, and C. And somebody say, oh, that's a good idea. So in other words, before the higher ups were presenting all these things, I would suggest they strongly consider the people who are going to participate or not participate in what you're going to do. Because if they're not going to participate because they don't like it, because they didn't have a chance to say yes or no, it's not going to make a difference what your whole scheme is, because nobody's going to be there to attend it.
I hear you, but I just at the same time, just so you know, Frank, we have such a wonderful United States mindset because we trust in the system of democracy and vote. And then that's not the model our church works in. Our church is not a democracy. And it's just a real cultural problem we have in the United States to think that we vote. We don't vote in the church. There are leaders in the church. That's one of the things why I think Father Jim even knew we had gotten some information because of the Vicariate meeting. And he said, no, we don't want our parishioners to get hit from left field with this information. Let's have a parish meeting and invite folks if they want to hear what's on the docket, what's being chewed about on the diocesan level for renewal. Let's share it with them so they don't get surprised. That's what we're doing. But there isn't like a vote to say, are we going to do a task force or are we going to have Brian Zielinski as the vicar? That's not how our system is going to work. I hate to be so blunt, but it's just not the church structure to do it that way. We don't vote in the church structure as we have it. But we want to know what parishioners want. We need to hear the feedback because the whole purpose is to serve the faithful, to bring the community to know Jesus better. It's just a matter of sometimes we talk at odds with each other. It's true. But you can hope for voting, but I'm not there. I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, just in my observations of a few things from time to time, is if you don't have your people, whoever they may be in whatever organization, that are going to want to do the job, whatever it might be, and if they feel that they're being left out, that don't have a word, yes or no, I can take no,
Right.
But as long as you hear me out and say,
Right.
Frank, you're stupid, that's, fine. If you don't have their cooperation, your best plans will not work, okay?
Right.
Because I'm gonna say, I wanna go to St. George's. Well, Frank, no, you can't, you gotta go to Nativity. Because we planned this all out for you.
Right.
I don't think I wanna go to Nativity, and
Right.
I don't wanna, and I can't go to St. whatever anymore. I may not go. What I'm trying to do is get, the church is slowly diminishing, okay? All religions are slowly diminishing. But our country, our whole country is actually quite religious. But I don't think there's a real leader anymore in religion or religions, okay? I think it's just sort of floating. And yes, you need rules and all that sort of thing. but the people themselves in whatever religion aren't being asked to participate. And by participating, I'm not saying you gotta listen to, well, listen, yes, do what I say, no. Just listen to your congregation. And from what I'm getting out of this is you guys are gonna get together and you're gonna come up with a plan. It may be a great plan, but you know what? When you bring it over to my house and say, Frank, look at this plan. On Monday, you gotta eat spaghetti. On Tuesday, you gotta have a hamburger. Wednesday, this and that, you know? And that's really great. But I don't like these dishes that you're presenting. How come you didn't ask me? That's all I'm asking. And that's what I'm saying in your...
That's what we're doing now?
But that's what this is, and everybody has to
Oh,
sacrifice
okay,
something.
but you're, then, if you're doing that now,
And
then
that's why
there's
we-
something wrong because you're not reaching the people. There should be more than just us here.
That's why we're streaming it. And that's why we're putting up on the board here, that if you wanna make your voice heard,
Call
go to
it,
Renewal at Buffalo Diocese.
All right, well, maybe I'm missing it because I'm not into the computers and all that sort of stuff. I just like it hearing it from people.
Right, and that's exactly what this is, and that's why Father Brian was beginning and going personally to the vicariates and talking with people from each area of the Diocese of Buffalo. So he's nowhere near finished doing that. He's stopping at every vicariate.
All right, but just let me continue on with to be a little bit obnoxious here. What happens if you have your plan and you present it to me, okay? And I go to church all the time, but it's not just me. It's the idea I go to church, okay? And you present this well thought out plan, but you never presented anything to me, at least face the value. I know you got it up there, but putting that up there for me is like, not putting it up at all. I'm not gonna pay attention. I wanna hear it from a person tell me, we're gonna do A, B, and C. Then I take you at your word. I don't care about the electronics coming through over a thing.
Right.
And then you say, well, you missed it because we had it on Saturday instead of Sunday or something.
But I would hope we'd have more meetings like this, once we know what's happening and then
Okay,
find out what.
then my next step to that is, when you do, and let's say you get a unfavorable response to what you want to do. And let's say it's not just one person, it's maybe, say 50 out of 100 people say, you're full blown. What would you do then?
Send it right over to Brian Zelenieski.
I want to.
Fine, now if Brian says the heck with you, we're gonna do the way we said it. See, you're gonna lose your audience. I don't want any more Catholics or
I
any
have a
more.
question for you. Why are you going to church? Are you going to church because it's what you've always done and it's always been here? Or are you going to church to receive the sacraments? Because I'm going to church to receive the sacrament. So why would you even question this? They're trying to fill the people's needs, which are that. And I don't understand why you would be so
People
against
have
that.
to want to do something though.
Right.
You can have the 10 Commandments, okay? But not everybody follows them because they either don't understand them or they don't want to or something. They'll follow maybe 5 out of the 10 Commandments, let's say. But they'll let the rest slide because they haven't been convinced that that's really what they want to do or should do. A lot of people go to church because, oh yeah, Father Joe said I gotta go to church and follow the commandments. I don't have the vaguest idea what the commandment means, okay? Well, so I may follow it, I may not. I'm just saying that people are gonna walk with their feet, and that's what I'm worried about.
Well,
The church isn't, your pews are not packed.
Right, but Frank, I think that's exactly it. People will walk with their feet. We saw, following the journey in faith and grace, a number of people just said the Catholic Church doesn't seem to be doing what I needed to do, and they left. But I went back to this slide on purpose so that we could see, this is a proposed path. Nobody's saying you have to do it. It's a proposal. We're in that discussion time. We're in the time of trying to think of what to do. And that's why the goal setting is important, because what Father Brian, as a leader of a task force, given the task to try to figure out what we can do to help the parishes in this diocese maintain their identity and serve the people with fewer priests. How can we do it? They're brainstorming and they're taking in information. I think they're doing exactly what you're hoping they would do. The bishop appointed a man to be in charge, and that man in charge is trying to get as much information from people. What Father Jim has asked us to do is share this with you so that you can hear it and try to think. So you're doing exactly what you want to do. You're doing this. Now, we can't say who's here and who's not here. That's beyond our capability. We try to offer it, and then people come and listen. Some people will just say, okay, whatever the diocese wants to propose. Others will say, I never heard of it. We can't fix all that, but we're here and we're trying to do this. So I think we're not so far apart on this. It's just a matter of, we gotta see that this is a proposal. This is a try to come up with a way, a creative way, to try to keep parishes and serve the people of God with fewer priests. And it'll change some of how we do things in parishes. It's got to. Parishes, if there's 100 priests and 161 parishes 8 years from now, obviously not every parish is going to have a single priest. And we know not more than 25 years ago in our corporate memory, parishes had 3 priests each, and they had the pastor, and he had his associates, and there was a delegation of duties, and all that's changed. They've gone through a radical change in how they can be pastors right now. Young men just a couple of years out of ordination are pastors. That's such a difficult thing when they haven't had the chance to watch a parish in action, learn some of the ins and outs before all of a sudden they have the mantle of responsibility. That's just a terrible burden to put on some of the young men that are now asked to be pastors. They haven't had the chance to understand what it's about yet, because they're just learning the roles. I can't begin to imagine the disparate roles that the priest has to take on in the sacramental realm, because there are so many things in my silly little administrative realm that keep me going in circles, that a guy who's doing the administration and the sacramental stuff must be going in some simultaneous circles in opposite directions. It's got to be very, very challenging. And so it's not healthy for some folks to be so overdone. So I like the idea of creative ways to get through this, to help the priests be able to do their service best that they can do and serve the people of God. With our, we've got to take on a little bit more on with the laity, I think. But I'll leave that for a second too. Other comments? It's okay, but I will stop us at 4 no matter what, so you can be sure of that.
Gary, do you have something to say over there? No. Neil, you have something to say?
Well, I mean, my comment, and I wish all of us somehow got impacted, but the biggest problem clearly is the ongoing reduction in parishioners, and especially young families. And I'd love to see what, we saw the statistic on the average age of a priest at 72. Well, I dare say the average parishioner age is something much higher than what it used to be. I recall the day where standing room only in church, and as I walked by the entrance of the church, I heard a roar of the congregation singing. Men and women and young families, many young families. And it scares me. I've been to multiple parishes in this diocese, and I travel. One of the advantages I guess I have is I've been to dioceses all over the country.
Right.
Western New York, Buffalo diocese, we're starving for young families, and the average age of the parishioner seems to get older and older. So I look at the 5 to 10 year plan, and I'm certainly worried about the lack of priests, but equal to that is a lack of parishioners. We're going to have 161 churches, and there's going to be a few families per church.
Right.
It's not sustainable. So there's a much larger issue, and it really comes down to the parishioners and the fact that families and people, we all need God. We need the Lord in our lives, and I don't know where society as a whole gets off thinking that it can self-manage and continue to go forward godless.
Right.
That's the problem.
I think what Father was saying that earlier too, the secularization. Our culture is something here in the U.S. That we're dealing with here. It is a cultural problem as well as a religious problem, and it's difficult to see. But one of the things I trust in is a sense of ebb and flow, an ebb and flow. So I might not see churches full again myself, but I think that that'll come again. At some point, somebody's gonna think, oh wow, that's a new idea, Jesus. And they'll come back into that idea of sharing gospel and knowing Jesus and the breaking of the bread and all. Whoa, like it's a new idea because it's been lost for a while. So it's part of that ebb and flow. I trust that's what's going to happen. I think the church has gone through an ebb and flow through the millennium. And so it's just, we're in a rough spot because there's kind of a convergence of events making it seem really desperate. But again, when we think we're the center of the Catholic universe, we're not. The Catholic universe is now below the equator. And it's something I don't think we Northern Hemisphere folks have got a grasp of yet. We still kind of think we're the right way of doing Catholicism up here in the Northern Hemisphere. We're the Roman Catholic Church. And there's something we're missing. We're missing something of liveliness, and vigor and spirit that the Southern Church has. And it's growing and we're diminishing. So sooner or later, the center of gravity will take us in a different direction. That's my trust.
I think we can be, in this whole idea of a family of parishes, what we gotta begin to recognize is that we're all disciples. You know, I don't know how many times in parishes I would say to people, I'd say, well, you know, if you really want to be a disciple, you want to bring somebody else to know Jesus Christ as you know Jesus Christ. So that's the responsibility of all of us. You know, it's not just the priests or the sisters or the people in charge, it's each one of us. And I remember saying to people, I said, well, next Sunday, just ask one person to come with you to church that doesn't come to the church. Your next door neighbor, somebody that you know is Catholic but probably has walked away. I would have maybe one or two people that would do that after I asked the whole congregation to just bring another person with them. You know? So it's a responsibility for us to build up the congregations. I can't do that from the altar. I can only do it from the altar after you bring them in.
But they don't want to come.
Yeah.
I've asked people, I don't know what people want, and there's a lot of people who still want to come, and I don't really know why. But following what Neil said before, I just wanted to say, with the average age being older, the parishioner, and then like Frank kind of throwing out there, what if there's 50 people? Like, I know older people don't like change, period. At all.
Younger people don't either.
Yeah.
So it's just like, so say 50 people, like if they could vote, would vote no. That's scary to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what's gonna happen, and look what's happened with churches that did try to, and I know you don't wanna bring that up or whatever, but like, a lot of people are just like, it's not going to church.
Right. There's been wounding. There's a lot of wounded and hurt feelings and mad, angry with the church. And so we're not going to fix that right now, but that's the idea. To recognize it is important. That there are just people who've been hurt by the machinations of the church structure that has not been helpful. And that's true, and so it's just time heals those things. I heard the bell. I keep to my word on these things, so we've been here an hour. You're always welcome to stay, but this is a church year for reminding us of St. Joseph, and they've extended, our diocese has extended the year of dedication for St. Joseph until next year in April, when our diocese is going to celebrate its 175th anniversary. So when I was thinking, how would we close this meeting, I thought, well, we'll have a prayer to St. Joseph. So we'll pray this. Now don't be so skunky. There we go. Okay. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O glorious St. Joseph, model of all devoted to labor, obtain for us the grace to work